policies again and again. I discussed, I gathered facts. Taxes, machinery, the future of wine grapes. We inspected the underpinnings of the house, tore boards off and looked for termites, jumped on the floors, drew sketches, imagined what it would look like after knocking walls out, estimated replumbing and rewiring. Every spare moment I had was spent going over all 720 acres of this property. Corners were found. Old-timers were talked to, their remarks were weighed and then usually discarded. One Saturday I walked to the westernmost line, 1 mile above the old house, then headed north down the mountain to Seward Creek and down past huge pools of cold mountain spring water flashing with wily trout. Deer thrashed out of the alder and pepperwood groves ahead of me, then turned halfway up steep glades to watch me. It was here, along the creek in the ageless silence of an autumn afternoon, that I made up my mind to buy the ranch and spend the rest of my life. In January of 1959, on New Year's Day, I started trucking tools and lumber to the old house. The ranch is 2 miles long, a long strip up the valley, and the main ranchstead is in the center. Each time I passed the last gatepost, a curtain of peace seemed to drop around everything. I started building an old bedroom wing into a new kitchen, working along with John, my eldest son, many times until midnight. Then we drove the 14 cold or rain-swept miles back east of the river to our home in town. My dreams kept expanding, but were intermittently disrupted with financial worries and imagined trouble. All our money was in this endeavor, and it looked insurmountable. I recalled the many remarks of the people I had talked with prior to my decision. One haunted me. The Smiths never had water. They piped it out of the creek in the summer. Water was essential. It worried me. When I turned the faucets on in the old house, there was a gurgle, then a slow, tepid flow of rusty, clay-silted water from the spigots. The old gravity system on the mountains above the house was inadequate. It would not do. A gasoline pump in the creek 100 yards below had to be started each morning and night. Many times it would not start. So I decided to drill a well. I studied witching, talked financing, talked to old-timers again. They showed me the multitude of holes, all dry, up every canyon, even dry holes right along the creek, that beautiful creek where water abounded throughout the year. January and February passed. A family of Mexicans who lived in a small cabin on the lower part of the ranch were pruning 27,000 grapevines, each carefully cut back to 2 buds. I leased the pear orchard. The hillsides and meadows were rampant with heavy grass. We bought 50 old ewes, wild-eyed and skinny, and turned them loose. I bought 2 white-faced cows and put them in the 300-acre south pasture. Bills mounted. Spring came. There was not time for all the work, and soon it would be time to start the long job of cultivating vineyards. I found myself gradually being entirely possessed with the project, sleeping alone in the house nights, bringing the 3 boys with me on weekends, cooking our meals over a Coleman stove in the empty house, waking up at night to hear the rats tearing around the attics above. The well drillers moved in. They went 25 feet and hit a tremendous stream, went another 40 feet for added storage, and pulled the rig out. We have an abundance of water. The house progressed. A large fireplace was built in the kitchen. The plumbing was the toughest, and I hated the smell of pipe compound and the patience and time it took to place the pipes. Pruning of the vineyards was completed. We took the tractors into the vineyards, a wobbly old crawler and a temperamental Fordson. Cultivating fascinated me. The smell of the rich, fresh-turned bottom ground, the churning up of the heavy cover crop, the early morning stillness broken only by the squeak of the disc and the noise of the tractor. Here was a place where a man could let his thoughts wander and expand. So we were pulled even farther into this way of living, and when Kathleen, my wife, saw that it was no longer a passing whim, she seriously prepared to move to the ranch. However, very reluctantly, as she was afraid, most unhappy with the old house, expecting her 8th child soon, and downright baffled by this complete change in family life. Then came mid-April and the apprehension and fear of frost on the tender shoots of the vines. And it came. Late in April, the frost whitened the barn roof and covered the vineyards. And then the sun came out. The leaves had curled black and shriveled, and the people who farmed the vineyards took the ravages in silence, many of them not going into the fields to even look. People said we were wiped out, that it was a terrible loss. Then the hillsides sported their delicate colors, wild flowers everywhere. The buckeye leafed, the black oak took on color. Lambs came and frolicked on the mountain meadows. The quail sang their mating songs everywhere. The grapes came back with secondary budding. Mornings our valley rang with merriment, and the tractors went tearing through the vineyards, the second time around. Farming, like no other way of life, teaches man's great dependency on the Supreme Being, the necessity of patience, philosophical attitudes, hope. Moments of despair, yes, but each one countered with a moment of triumph. Bernard Barney Fetzer, 1920 to 1981. Introduction. Sustainability. Fetzer's Business Revolution. On a crisp September morning in 1987, I was walking through a block of Sauvignon Blanc vines at Fetzer Vineyards. I was the head winemaker, and this early stroll through the vineyards was one of my favorite rituals. The grape harvest was just getting underway, and soon I would be inside the cellar, managing a big crew amidst the hustle and bustle of what California winemakers call crush. That's the hectic period in early autumn when grapes are picked and pressed, and their juice flows into tanks to begin fermenting into wine. But for now, I was where I loved to be, alone with nature in the still of the dawn, using all my senses to smell the soil, inspect the ripening bunches, and taste the grapes. Sauvignon Blanc is a fruity white wine, crisp and refreshing. It delivers these qualities in abundance when it's grown in Mendocino County, where warm days are separated by cool nights. It was up to me to decide when these grapes would be picked, a real moment of truth in the wine business. Pick too early or too late, and you miss the time when the fruit is precisely ripe enough and full of flavor, perfectly ready to become the best wine you will ever make. I had been making wine professionally for 10 years, so biting into a wine grape gave me a lot of information. I first tasted for the slightly bitter acids in the skin. These components would give the wine its crisp, mouth-watering quality. Then I tasted for the natural sugars in the juice, which would give the wine its flavors, aromas, and body. In the rows where I was tasting, the grapes were infused with lush, creamy flavors of ripe figs and melon, perfect for Sauvignon Blanc. The vines had produced a sweetness and balance in harmony with the sun, soil, and clean air surrounding them. These grapes were ready to pick, and my excitement started to build. I began thinking of how I would manage the grapes in the winery. I would not have to do too much, because nature had already done so well. My job would be largely to let the wine reveal itself. When I moved to the next block, just 15 short feet away, my excitement quickly subsided. These Sauvignon Blanc grapes